12 U.S. fighter jets launched a surprise attack and obliterated a drug lab so secret, not even the Mexican government saw it coming. A top-secret cartel facility deep in Mexico was wiped off the map in under 10 minutes, and the cartel never saw it coming. So, why did the U.S. go full military mode? Was it legal? And what happens now that the cartel wants revenge? We have to rewind to one quiet morning in June, when something strange began showing up on military satellites. It was early morning on June 12, 2025, when something strange started showing up on satellite images from northern Mexico, near the state of Durango. This area is known for being controlled by powerful drug cartels, especially the Sinaloa cartel. People on online defense forums started sharing images showing weird heat patterns. The infrared scans showed several explosions happening almost at the same time, followed by a massive fire that burned for hours. At first, no one really knew what was going on. There was no official news, no press release, nothing. Just fire and chaos in the middle of nowhere. Within 2 days, rumors started spreading. And then, some insider sources finally confirmed it. 12 U.S. fighter jets had flown deep into Mexican airspace and bombed a hidden cartel drug lab. These weren't just any jets. They were F-15E Strike Eagles, advanced planes used for major military missions. The fact that 12 of them were used in a single mission shocked everyone. Normally, that kind of firepower is used for war zones, not drug labs. What's even crazier is how quietly it all happened. Locals who live nearby said they didn't hear helicopters or see drones before the explosion. They just suddenly saw fire raining from the sky, followed by loud booms and glowing skies. By the time anyone figured out what had happened, the jets were already gone, back across the border into the US. It was like they came out of nowhere and disappeared just as fast. At first, everyone thought this was just another cartel drug lab. Mexico has hundreds of them hidden in the mountains and jungles, making things like meth and fentanyl. But after the strike, leaked reports started coming out, and that's when the story took a dark turn. This wasn't just a regular lab. It was hiding something much more dangerous. According to US intelligence sources, this lab wasn't only making drugs. It was storing chemical weapons too. That's a big deal. Satellites had picked up strange chemical signatures in the area weeks before the attack. These were chemicals that didn't make sense for a normal drug operation. Some of them were known to be used in nerve agents, the kind of stuff that can paralyze or even kill people in small amounts. Apparently, the cartel was experimenting with new types of drugs that were mixed with deadly chemicals. The goal was to create something super addictive, but also hard to detect. Maybe even something that would slip past border checks.
Some agents believed that this was part of a secret plan to flood the US with a new kind of drug that was even worse than fentanyl. Imagine a drug that not only got people addicted, but could kill them with just a tiny dose. One leaked report claimed that a massive shipment was almost ready. It was set to move through Texas in less than a week. If that shipment had made it across the border, thousands of people could have died, either from overdose or exposure to the toxic substances.
That's why the airstrike had to happen fast. There was no time for slow raids or arrests. This is why the mission was handled by the military instead of the DEA.
The US government wasn't just treating this as a drug case anymore. It became a national security threat. And when that happens, the military takes over. Now let's talk about the question that everyone's thinking. Was this airstrike even legal?
Can the US just fly jets into Mexico and blow stuff up without asking first?
Well, if we're going strictly by the rules, then no, it wasn't legal. The US can't just attack another country's land without permission. That would normally count as a violation of that country's sovereignty.
In this case, it's like going into someone else's house and breaking stuff, even if you had a good reason.
But here's where it gets tricky. In real life, especially when it comes to things like drug cartels and secret operations, not everything is done out in the open.
The US and Mexico have had a kind of, quote, silent partnership when it comes to fighting cartels.
Even though they might not always admit it in public, behind the scenes, they sometimes work together in secret. This is called shadow cooperation. Basically, sometimes Mexico can't act directly on cartels because it might cause political problems. like people protesting or accusing the government of helping the US.
So instead, they look the other way while the US steps in and does what they need to do.
That way, both sides win. The cartel is hit, but no one has to take the blame publicly.
Some reports even say that Mexican officials were informed after the strike, not before.
That's done on purpose. It gives them something called plausible deniability, which means they can say, "We didn't know, it wasn't us." At the same time, the US doesn't get officially called out for violating borders, and everything stays quiet.
And this isn't the first time something like this has happened. The US has done similar things in places like Colombia, Honduras, and even Venezuela.
They sometimes send special forces, drones, or airstrikes into areas where cartels or terror groups are hiding. These operations are kept low-key and never fully confirmed, but they happen more than we think. Now let's look at how this crazy mission was actually planned, because this wasn't something that just happened overnight. It took months of spying, tracking, and preparation. The mission had a secret code name, Operation Eagle Lantern.
And it started when US cyber intelligence teams picked up something weird. They were listening in on satellite phone calls between cartel leaders. These calls were heavily encrypted, but the NSA cracked the code. The conversations mentioned a new kind of drug, something powerful and dangerous. The location kept coming up as somewhere near Durango, Mexico. That's when they knew something big was going down. After that, intelligence agencies started watching the area 24/7. They used satellite cameras, thermal imaging, and even sound monitoring to scan the region. Over time, they discovered an underground facility that didn't show up on regular maps. It was hidden under thick forests and rocky hills, probably designed to avoid being spotted by aircraft or satellites. Now here's the part that shows how careful the US was. They wanted to avoid any civilians getting hurt, and they also wanted to avoid causing drama with the Mexican government. So they chose a plan with 0 boots on the ground. That means no soldiers were sent into Mexico, only jets. 12 F-15E Strike Eagles were picked for the job. These jets can fly fast, carry heavy bombs, and dodge enemy radars. They took off from 2 different US air bases, one in Texas and one in Arizona. The mission was carried out under full radio silence, so no one outside the core team even knew it was happening. To make sure the jets weren't detected, they scrambled airborne radar systems and used jamming pods. These are special devices that block enemy communication signals. The jets also shut down mobile networks, radio towers, and GPS in the area during the strike. That way, no one could call for help or record anything. Everything had to go perfectly. The timing, the bomb targets, the exit route, all of it was pre-planned down to the second. Each pilot knew their role, and the mission was rehearsed using flight simulators weeks before the real thing. When the jets entered Mexican airspace, they flew low to avoid radar. They dropped their bombs, destroyed the lab, and left in less than 10 minutes. By the time anyone on the ground reacted, the planes were already back over US territory. After the strike, everything changed. The lab that once stood hidden in the Durango Mountains was gone, completely destroyed. The bombs had hit with such power that the buildings were flattened, the underground tunnels collapsed, and fires burned for hours. It was like something out of a war movie. Drone footage that came out later showed the true scale of the damage. At first, Mexican news outlets reported that there had been a gas explosion. They said a storage unit caught fire, which caused the blast. But as more information started leaking online, especially radar images and satellite pictures, people began realizing that this wasn't an accident. This was a military strike.
And then things got even crazier. The cartel that owned the lab, believed to be a branch of the Sinaloa cartel, went into full panic mode. According to leaked cartel messages, they didn't even know the lab had been found. It was supposed to be one of their most secret locations. The fact that it got hit so hard and so fast shook them. As a result, the cartel started punishing its own people. Several mid-level commanders were executed because they were blamed for failing to protect the lab or leaking information. Others just vanished, either killed or on the run. The leadership clearly wanted to show strength, but inside, they were panicking. With the main lab gone,
and several leaders missing, smaller rival cartels saw an opportunity. They started moving into Durango, trying to take over the area. This led to violent turf wars just days after the strike. Shootouts, kidnappings, and roadblocks became common again. It was chaos.
There have been a lot of operations against drug cartels over the years. Secret DEA missions, drone attacks, undercover busts, and even cross-border arrests. But nothing like what happened this time. This strike stands out in a big way, and here's why.
It was the first time the U.S. used full-scale fighter jets to directly attack a drug cartel target on Mexican soil. That's not just rare, it's historic.
Until now, the U.S. always tried to handle cartel problems through law enforcement, with the DEA, FBI, or even local police departments. Sometimes they used drones or worked quietly with Mexican forces. But using military fighter jets is a whole new level. This wasn't just a raid, it was an airstrike, like something you'd see in a war zone. The message was loud and clear. The U.S. is now treating cartels like terrorist groups, not just criminal gangs. And that changes everything. When you treat a group like a terrorist organization, the rules change. You're no longer just arresting people. You're allowed to use military force, surveillance, and even bombing missions, like they did in Iraq or Afghanistan.
Some political experts are even calling this the Bin Laden moment of the drug war. That might sound dramatic, but think about it. The US found a hidden compound, suspected it of storing something extremely dangerous, and used jets to wipe it out without warning. It's the same kind of tactic used in counterterrorism operations. This could be the start of a new approach, where the US goes after drug labs and cartel hideouts using full military power. And honestly, it raises a lot of questions. Will there be more strikes like this? Will other countries allow it? Or will it start a bigger conflict? What makes this even more shocking is how fast and clean the operation was. No US troops on the ground, no messy arrests, just 12 jets in and out in minutes. That level of precision shows that this was carefully planned, and that the US is willing to act aggressively if it sees a threat. When the strike happened, the Mexican government didn't say much at first. The president gave a very careful, vague statement. He said something about investigating the incident and ensuring national safety. But he never confirmed or denied that the US was behind it. Still, according to sources close to the government, behind closed doors, he was furious. And honestly, it's not hard to see why. Even though the cartel lab was destroyed and possibly saved lives, this was a foreign military, flying into Mexican airspace without official permission. That's a huge deal. It makes Mexico look weak in front of its own people. Imagine if the situation was reversed. If Mexico sent jets into the US without asking, people would freak out. Mexican sovereignty is a very sensitive issue. Their government has been under pressure from citizens and critics for years. People say they rely too much on US help or let the US push them around. So when something like this happens, it feels like a slap in the face politically. Even if the goal was to stop drugs, it's still seen as a violation. It wasn't just Mexico reacting either. Other countries quickly responded too. China and Russia both came out and condemned the strike. They accused the US of using excessive force and violating international law. They said this kind of action could make things worse, not better. China even said it could open the door for more countries to ignore borders and launch attacks whenever they feel like it. On top of that, human rights groups raised red flags too. They asked for an independent investigation to find out if any innocent people were killed or harmed in the blast. Even though the US claimed the mission had 0 civilian casualties, these groups said they want proof. But not everyone was upset. In the US, a lot of politicians, especially from border states like Texas and Arizona, supported the strike. One senator said, "It's about time we hit back. These cartels are killing our kids with fentanyl." They saw the airstrike as a sign that the US was finally taking the drug crisis seriously. Officials also warned American citizens traveling in Mexico to stay alert and avoid certain areas. They said that tourists or Americans living abroad could be at risk if the cartel decides to take revenge by going after soft targets. What's scary is that this isn't the first time cartels have responded with violence. In the past, they bombed police stations, shot at army vehicles, and even kidnapped government officials. But this time feels more serious, because now the US used military jets. Smash that like button if this blew your mind. Hit Hit subscribe for more insane real-world stories, and don't forget to share this with someone who still thinks the war on drugs is just about arrests.